income countries and to support economic transformation, especially in Africa and throughout the global south. So, let me contextualize this. You know, we have two fundamental problems, and that is why many of our countries are struggling with the debt. Two fundamental problems. Problem number one is debt management. The kind of debt infrastructure that we have has very short grace period, has very short tenure, and therefore it becomes very difficult to undertake any meaningful development. Our position is that we should increase the grace period for money borrowed for development, not 3 years, maybe 10 years. We should increase the tenure of debt for development resources, not 15 years, but maybe between 40 and 50 years. That way, when you mobilize resources for development, you have adequate time to be able to undertake that development without the constraints of having to repay this debt. That is number one. Number two, the other problem that we have in the whole of financing development is what we are calling responsible sovereign lending. What do we mean by that? We're saying it is no longer tenable for us to have this big animal called credit rating, where countries using arbitrary formula are rated here, and if you don't do certain things, you are taken down, and as you are taken down, you pay more interest. It is also, we need to have a conversation about credit rating agencies, and we need to have a conversation about risk assessment. Because there is perceived risk that becomes larger than real risk. And that perceived risk is pushed by certain quarters to make Africa uncompetitive. And that is the reason why, while others are accessing development resources at 1 or 2%, most African countries are accessing development resources in markets at between 10 and 15%. Explain to me, honorable members, if one set of countries are accessing development resources at 1, 2%, and another is accessing between 10 and 15%, is it realistically possible for us to grow at the same rate? No. This is the conversation we must have. You know? And we must remove this arbitrary unfairness. You know? This arbitrary unfairness from global financing. And that is why we are saying we must have a thorough conversation about the reform of multilateral development banks and the whole international financial architecture as a whole. When we started this debate a year ago, we looked like mad people. But I promise you, today, in every meeting, everybody has come to the conclusion that there is a problem with the architecture of international financing. And the conversation is no longer if, the conversation is when are we and how are we going to reform it. And that is why it is important for institutions like the East Africa Legislative Assembly to apply your mind to what kind of contribution are you going to make in this reform that is going to make our economies access development financing. It is the only way we can make meaning to our development. The last IDA replenishment, for example, in 2021 raised US $91 billion, which was disbursed to eligible beneficiary countries over a period of 3 years. The Kenya Summit that we are holding in April aims to highlight to donors and other development partners critical priority target areas of development financing in Africa and in our region, make the case for a significantly higher level of financing in either 21 cycle, and support East African countries to effectively address development challenges and exploit the huge opportunities that we have in our region. This is the candid conversation we're going to have. And I am very confident that the fact that World Bank accepted that this was a necessary exercise confirms to us that somebody somewhere is listening to what we are saying.